Hello everyone, today I'll be narrating 3 new creepyposts that I found off of the Let's Not Meet subreddit. Liking this video and subscribing to my channel helps me a lot. After you've heard these stories, let me know what you think of them in the comments below. But without further ado, let's dive straight into their experiences.
These are their stories.
My family decided to fly across the country to visit me in LA, where I live. We thought it would be nice to visit Catalina Island. When we arrived, it became apparent to us that it was off season. It was late November, the weather was cold, and as a result, the island was nearly empty besides locals and a few straggling tourists such as ourselves. Our first priority was to ditch our luggage so we could explore the island, so we immediately checked into our motel, though that word hardly does the place justice. I called a motel because all the doors to the rooms exited to the outside, but in actuality our room was one of the 20 to 30 quaint guest house looking buildings arranged in sort of a horseshoe shape around a walkway, with rooms on either side of the path. The entrance to the motel was essentially one of the points of the horseshoe, and if you walked dead straight, you'd reach the room we were given, essentially on the corner before you have to go right to go further into the horseshoe. So from our room, one path led back to the street, the other further into the secluded maze of rooms. After a day of exploring and having just finished dinner, it was time for the cold, dark walk back to the room. Catalina Island is a decent distance from the mainland, and it gets dark. I pulled my black hoodie tighter over my freezing ears and walked ahead of my parents to the hotel room, telling them I just wanted to go to sleep. And I did immediately. I was already losing consciousness as they entered after me, drifting off without so much as a good night. I then woke up to my mom saying my name, a harsh whisper. The room had 2 beds, my parents' bed closer to the door and mine further in the room. My mom's voice cut through the silence again. She sounded concerned for me. I didn't blame her, considering my mental state at the time. Groggy, I rolled over. "What?" I asked. As my eyes adjusted to the dim moonlight coming in through the curtains, I saw her turn to face me. She was surprised to see me in my bed. Her eyes got wide. If I'm in my bed, who was she talking to? We both looked back to where she was previously looking to see a hooded figure in all black standing over their bed. This was horrifically startling as it was on an island in the middle of the ocean and wake up to see a hooded stranger looming over you. This moment seemed to last forever. My mom's words became low and severe as she said my dad's name in a dire voice I've never heard her use before. Then the hooded figure did something so bizarre and unsettling. It didn't advance towards us, but instead crouched in the corner near where it stood. The way it crouched was so absolutely unexpected, even in regards to this already unexpected situation, that it terrified me. It seemed animalistic. I knew 2 things. The hooded figure had been standing over us sleeping, and it's not acting in any sort of way that I could understand. As opposed to the infinite moment of this figure standing over us mere seconds ago, the series of events that unfolded when my hulking ex-military dad woke up happened in an instant. Suddenly, we were out the door, not knowing which way the intruder went. My mom was screaming, "Get him, get him." My dad was running down one path of the horseshoe, further into the hotel, shouting through sheer adrenaline. I ran down the other path, towards the street. When I got there, not a sign of the intruder, but it became suspiciously quiet behind me. I ran back to the room to find my dad quietly walking back, his head low. He gets really close to me and I hear him say, "It's a kid." The explanation: some young teen, tall and lanky as I am in my 20s, wearing all black including a black hoodie, went into the wrong room, our room. The one time my parents just so happened to forget to lock the door. My mom woke up when he entered and seeing a tall person in a black hoodie, thought he was me, assumingly leaving the room. And when the hooded figure crouched, that was him when he realized his mistake and panicked. He was scared of us. As I got back to the room, my mom walked out and hugs this kid, who was now crying his eyes out. I would be too if a massive ex-soldier was sprinting after me with murder in his eyes. So, to the now traumatized kid from Catalina Island, sorry for the misunderstanding. For a bit of backstory, I live in a big city which is mostly a friendly place, but like all cities, it has its rough areas. There are 2 main spots that are known to be particularly rough, and for the first 14 years of my life, I lived in one of those areas. So though it can naturally be a bit uncomfortable, I tend to be pretty unbothered by odd people talking to me in the street. Anyway, I moved from one rough area and moved to a safer one, but it's very close to where I originally lived. I know both of these areas pretty well too, which helped me with what happened 5 months ago. I had some stuff going on in my personal life and going through phases of bad anxiety as it is. I had to make the decision to take some time off of work, but wanted to try and stay in a routine and be productive. I went to the dentist way past when I should have. So I made an appointment and when it rolled around, I walked there. My dentist is in the rough area that I now live close to. On my route home, I have to walk past a pub on a main road which has a super bad reputation. Anything you can think of, it's happened inside or just outside of this pub. Anyway, I noticed someone sat on the bench outside the pub. I have my headphones in but see him saying something, so I assume he's asking me for something and take an earplug out. He asked me if I want to join him for a drink. This was around 11:30 a.m. by the way. I just said no thanks. Now, as soon as I got a few steps away, I had this bad feeling like something was just not right. As I mentioned though, I was going through a phase of bad anxiety, so I chalked it up to just being that. After about 2 minutes, I go to turn left and see the man walking in my direction in the corner of my eye. I told myself it was nothing, but took my headphones out anyway just in case, as I was about to walk through a narrow road that leads to a car park and is always very empty. All of a sudden I hear him shouting at me, "Hey miss, I'm talking to you, wait." He catches up to me and tells me, "I'm not a creep, but you're too beautiful to let go." I try and stay polite but also make it clear I'm not interested. He asked if I was single. I said yes. When he asked what I was doing that night, I said I had no plans. I 100% know I should have lied, and as the truth came out, I was really annoyed with myself, but whatever. He seems to get the message, and I say I really have to go, so I carry on walking thinking that it's the end of it. So I make my way across this big car park. At the end of the car park is a cycle/pedestrian lane that has a massive wall on one side with 2 lots of steps that lead to a car park to a retail park, and bushes on the other end, and it's super narrow. I get into the lane and hear footsteps like someone is running, probably a jogger. I'm getting paranoid until right behind me I hear, "At least give me your number." I finally start to panic and realize actually it's not my anxiety and this is super shady. I give him my number but change the last digit, and this guy proceeds to attempt to drop call me. Clearly my phone doesn't ring, and then he starts getting annoyed saying I need to give him the right number. He then has his hand basically on my phone, standing way too close to me, and orders me to type his number in and drop call him. Creep now has my number. Still not enough for him, I reiterate that I'm on my way somewhere and seriously need to get going. He then grabbed me by my elbow and I had a massive adrenaline rush. Next thing I knew, I was at the top of one of those sets of steps that lead to a much busier and open space. I ran as fast as I could. Luckily, one of my friends works in one of the stores in the retail park, so I ran over to it practically looking over my shoulder the whole time. I find my friend, visibly shaking, can barely speak. She asks if I'm okay and I just burst into tears. I gather my thoughts and tell my friend what just happened. He's been calling my phone this whole time. She takes my phone and notes his number and then blocks him. She takes me to the staff room and convinces me to file a police report, which I do. Unfortunately though, I found out street harassment is not actually illegal where I live, but because he made physical contact, it might not be a complete lost cause. The police tell me they will be in touch. Now fast forward until around 2 weeks later. A mom's friend who knew about what happened sent her an article and asked her to show me. I genuinely couldn't believe my eyes. It was about a man who had followed a girl and then assaulted her in the same rough area. At the end of the article is a picture. It's him. I haven't heard anything from the police, and since he had already been charged, I figured there wasn't any need for me to contact them again. My heart goes out to the girl, and although currently in jail, I really hope neither of us ever have to face him again. His charge was pretty serious, so he will be there for a long time, thankfully. The following experience happened to me a few years ago when I was on the train home from school. It was around 10 p.m. at night as I had stayed back in a public library to study. One thing you should know is that my train line is particularly dodgy, and you can meet some truly weird people on the train when it's late. When I got into my carriage that night, it was particularly empty, apart from 3 women sitting on the opposite end of the carriage. I sat down and plugged my earphones in to watch YouTube. My train ride usually takes around 45 minutes. About 3 stops into the train ride, and the only other person who had gotten onto my carriage at the time was a man who was wearing construction clothes. He sat near the 3 women, so I assumed he knew them. I turned my attention back to my video. A few minutes later, I noticed that the 3 women who were sitting on the opposite side of my carriage had moved to my side. I didn't really think much of it as I was engrossed in the video I was watching. That's when I noticed someone take a seat opposite of me. It was the man who had gotten on earlier. He asked me my name, but he was giving me a weird vibe, so I pretended like I couldn't hear him. I had my earphones in after all. He then proceeded to tap my knee to gain my attention. There was no use ignoring him, so I removed my earphones and looked at him. He was a big guy, probably around early 40s, and he was clean shaven. He asked me my name, to which I gave him a fake name. He then asked me how old I was. I was in my school uniform at the time, so I told him. He reached out his hand and introduced himself. Not wanting to be rude, I extended my own hand to shake his hand. This is when things started to get weird. His handshake was super weird. His grip was abnormally tight and he seems to pull my hand towards him as he shook it. I quickly withdrew my hand. He then asked me if I had a girlfriend, as he thought I was quite attractive. Alarm bells began to ring in my head, and glanced over at the 3 women who refused to even look over my direction. Seeing as they would be no help, I would just have to look out for myself. He then took out his phone and started showing me a picture of a girl who seemed to look around my age. He then asked me if I thought she was beautiful. Again, not wanting to be rude, I simply nodded and said she was. He then asked me if I would be interested in marrying her. I just started laughing as I thought he was just joking around, but his eyes were dead serious. and he just glared at me. He repeated his question, to which I responded that I did not know her and that it was inappropriate. He suggested that I give him my number so that he could arrange for us to meet. This seriously creeped me out, and I politely declined, stating that I was busy with school and that I was not looking to get into a relationship. As I said this, the train was coming to a halt at a station. I was still 3 stops away from mine, but I decided that it was time for me to get out of the situation. I apologized that this was my stop and that it was nice to meet him. As I got up to leave, he extended his hand for a handshake and thanked me for talking to him. I didn't want to shake his hand, but I did not want to trigger him, so I reached out my hand. Suddenly, he grabbed my hand and pulled it towards him. His eyes were full of anger. He then asked, "What, you don't want to marry my daughter? I will break you." I quickly broke the grip and left the carriage. As it was nighttime, there were always police officers patrolling the platforms. I rushed towards one of the officers and told him everything that happened. I then described his clothing and which carriage he was sitting on. While waiting for the next train, the same officer came up to me and told me that officers had picked him up 2 stations down and thanked me for letting him know. Although the officer asked for my details, I was never notified as to what happened to him. I just hope that I never have to experience a man on a train like that in the future. Alright, so that's it. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. Let me know what you thought of these stories in the comments below. But as always,
Have a nice day.